So, good morning and welcome. Can I thank everybody for attending the Healthier Community Scrutiny Committee, and also can I welcome and thank those people that are watching this via the webcast. Just the normal thing, can I ask anybody who's got a mobile phone on them to turn it off, please? Go on to item agenda 1, the attendance and apologies, the attendance register is going around. Can I ask everybody to sign it, please?
Apologies received from Councillor Taylor. Can you also fill in the decks of interest if there's any as well? Thanks.
Two declarations of interest. Della?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any interest that need to be declared. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Perhaps I should just declare that I am a member of the adoption panel.
I think it's best just to cover yourself. Yeah, if you can put it in the register, please. Item agenda 3, minutes of the previous meeting. If you go to page 5, please. Thanks, Dana. If we go through it for accuracy and any items outstanding, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Thank you. The matters arising? No? Thank you very much. Go on to action, agenda item 4, action sheet, page 11 and 12. Helen?
Thank you, Chair. Just one outstanding item on the action sheet, that is the annual review of the evaluation of performance. We've yet to receive the recommendations. As soon as we do, we'll forward them on to you.
Thank you. We'll go straight on then to agenda item 5, which is on page 13. We've got the questions. Everybody's got a copy of the questions? Basically, we'll do as we've always done. I'll start it off, and then I'll ask somebody to go on to and ask the next question. Again, just a normal thing I always say, please don't bring up any ward issues. Thank you.
Members, can I just take a minute to remind you of the scrutiny activity here? We're looking at the progress and impact of accepted recommendations from your previous meetings. It's been identified by the Wales Audit Office that it's not always evident of the impact of your scrutiny recommendations, and they're not always monitored. So we've devised a report that will come to you annually to review the impact of the recommendations that you've made in the previous year, and they're contained in the appendix to the report. So what we'd like you to do is scrutinise the impact, timescales and progress detailed in the appendix, and make recommendations or comments from that.
Where's Karen gone?
She's looking for them.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Thanks ever so much for attending. I think everybody knows everybody, don't we? I don't think we need to do any introductions. Everybody's read the report, so if you're happy, we'd go straight into the questions. If you'd like to go to page 18 of the report. Can I ask then, is care delivered no personal outcome focused, and what does this mean to the service users?
Sorry, Chair, can I trouble you for the question again as I was scrabbling around to look at my...
Is care delivered no personal outcome focus, and what does this mean to the service user?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on person-centred planning across social care. So it's all about what matters to the individual. And from that, what outcomes they're looking to achieve. This is being supported now by the work we're doing to get ready for the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales new integrated assessment. So we now have our go-live version of that integrated assessment, which looks very different in the way we assess than we have previously. And that assessment is all about, from the very point somebody comes into contact with the local authority in social care, adult services, what matters to them. From that, we tease out their personal outcomes, what it is that they want to achieve, and then how they can use themselves as resources, their network, their community, to find those solutions. And then only if there is no other way but the local authority, social care, needs to provide something, we will do that, and we will do that in a way that looks at how do we support somebody to meet that personal outcome. We go live on the 6th of April with that, so we will be building from there, but certainly the new assessment documentation is in place, and the big push has been changing practitioners' thinking, because although the documentation lends itself to doing that, it's quite a different way of working from how we've always worked in the past. So with an awful lot of training being delivered to frontline practitioners and first-line managers to actually really start looking at that, and changing the way where we supervise staff and staff come into supervision, for us to really look at, so what did the person say was their personal outcome, and what have we done to support them to be able to achieve that.
Now, how do we address the problem of what they want and we can actually realistically provide? How do we marry that up?
It's not a wants-based system. There is still an element of eligibility. How we determine eligibility has changed. From the 6th of April, there will no longer be eligibility in relation to you have to meet critical or substantial level of need. Eligibility will now be the local authority will only provide support to you if there is nowhere else that you could receive that support. So that's the difference, really. And I think it's going to take us, all of us, some time across health and social care to kind of get used to a very different way of thinking to be able to do that.
How about the residential sector? How do we deal with that?
Well, obviously, before anybody who we are funding into residential care goes into residential care, they have to have had an assessment. So we will be looking at what are their personal outcomes. And then through that, everybody who has a care and support plan has to have a minimum of an annual review or a more frequent review if that's indicated. So we would be looking, the review is about what have we done to enable that person to achieve their outcomes, be them in a residential setting or in a nursing setting. There's also a much stronger emphasis on advocacy, so that people who require advocates to help them express their own views, we will be required to provide that. And so that's a safeguard, if you like.
Yeah. On page 20, was a recommendation that there be a map of residential care, but there isn't a map in the market position statement or on the residential care section of the website, so even though it said that it has been implemented, so can you comment on that?
I can't actually, and I'll need to go back and see what our commissioning colleagues are doing about that. But yes, I agree with you. I think it would be very helpful to have a map of where all the residential care provision is.
Thanks, Ray. Just a follow-up to this thing. What role do you see in this in the marrying up of the services of the Be Independent service?
Be Independent will very much sit with what's called IAA, which is information, advice and assistance. So it's that step before somebody might come through to have a full assessment. So Be Independent is at that prevention and early intervention stage. So it's there to help people to find solutions. And hopefully that means that they either won't need to come through into social care, or they'll come through into social care at a later stage.
Can I quickly, sorry, to take you back to page 18, the recommendation 2. Can you tell me what's changed as a result of the service user feedback?
Service user feedback is obviously got a number of different ways, from individual workers going out and talking to service users. We do survey service users. One of the very strong components of the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act is that there will be a requirement now to formally survey service users and carers about the services that they've received. We're working with the regional transformation teams at the moment to actually make sure we include everything in that survey that's required from a performance information point of view, and there'll be a requirement that we have to have. It's very difficult to get returns to surveys. We all find that, and I think Welsh Government has set it something like 20. We have to have 25% back. So we're working on what that might look like. That will be a very key way of gathering that sort of broad overview survey information. But of course, individual workers, actually our service users and their carers, how well we're doing. We obviously take information from complaints and compliments that we receive to inform what we're doing.
Yeah, I know when we've spoken to service users in the past on other topics, we realise that it's pointless sending out a survey because they put it beyond the clock on the mantelpiece and it stays there. So, yeah.
Hi. If you go on to the overall summary on page 21, I'd like to know has the range and quality of services improved as a result of publishing the market position statement?
I think there are some real tensions and challenges in the marketplace at the moment, particularly in relation to domiciliary and residential care, and certainly ourselves and commissioning colleagues are working very hard. It's not a particularly stable marketplace at the moment. That's not unique to Torfaen. I think that's been experienced sort of regionally and nationally, and we are quite concerned about that. I'm trying to work very hard to get some stability into that marketplace.
Thank you. Our fifth question, I apologise for that. Looking at this and the effectiveness of the adult duty pod, do you feel there's been any improvement in the accessibility of the CPNs?
CPNs obviously are sitting out there in health service, and we do work very closely. We've got our own staff in the duty pod, and we've got very strong links into where most of the CPNs sit, which is in the community mental health teams, older persons community mental health teams, and our links are strong there. What we've really focused on is using Vanguard methodology, and we've started, I think many of you may know, a new project in Blaenavon, based in Blaenavon Health Centre, looking at a very different way of working with primary care, with the health board on what people have told us matters to them. So having a single point of access to try and reduce what we call sort of handoff. So when people comes into the service, instead of them being kind of, well, I've done my bit of work, so I'm going to pass you on to somebody else, actually somebody staying with them and trying to support them through that journey and pulling in the people that they need to support them, but having one person really there as the point of contact. It's very early days. We've only started this project. The team came together on the 29th of February, so we're only a few weeks into it. At the moment, they are working with the Vanguard consultants on performance measures and what good looks like. We're learning from other Vanguard projects, both in adult mental health and also Caerphilly have done one in adult social care for older people as well. So we're taking the learning from that. But that different way of working means it's easier to pull people in that have particular expertise rather than effectively what people experience as a sort of a hand-off to them. They're more likely to work on that basis, and it works really well.
Yes, thank you.
Recommendation on page 26. Staff told us there will be a specific need for the next independent living development in Lanternum. Will this be addressed? Page 26 recommendation. Thank you.
I think if I can explain the background to this, we actually visited the people who are living in Cwmbran, and they were really happy. We actually went into their flats, and that was brilliant. But they said they loved it because they could literally cross the road, and there was all the Cwmbran town centre there, the bus station was there, railway station, everything was fine. But when you look at the geographical location of Lanternum, that's totally different. So how are you going to make sure you don't have the isolation problem?
Yes, this is our core and cluster, and we're building on the very successful core and cluster for people with learning disabilities in Cainant, and this is the Somerton project with Melin, which will be not just for people with learning disabilities, but also people with physical disabilities, people with high needs, maybe autism or high needs. Yes, I mean, one of the huge successes of Cainant, you're absolutely right, is its location. And whilst we can't replicate that, actually Lanternum, the Somerton site, it's got a good bus route on it. There will be support available to people. And so part of anybody's individual plan will be looking at how they are able to be supported to access the community. We're not at a state, we're at the stage at the moment that we're just identifying the people that wish to move in there, and that's at its early stages. We're doing that with Melin. So once we've identified those people that want their own front door and their tenancies, then we'll be able to work on an individual basis with what an individual person might need living there in order to make sure absolutely that they can access that full range of community resources. Transport, obviously, being a key one to be able to get around the borough.
Can I take you on to page 28 now, please? The effectiveness of the Family Focus Service. Can you tell me, why has this taken so long, and have opportunities developed may have been missed?
I don't think any opportunities have been missed, but I think it's taken the time to embed this new early intervention service, because in some ways it's a new way of working. But I think that you can see from some of the data in terms of the number of children that have been removed from the Child Protection Register, that we can see that it is beginning to embed, and that sort of very focused pieces of work that are happening. The other side of it is a very small team of people. I think we had 3 people in there at one time, and we've just now added to that by employing 2 new staff. So we've seen the sort of successes that it's beginning to have. we believe it will in longer term have an impact on the looked after population. Yeah, but it's taken time to embed, and as I say, a new way of working for the social workers in truth as well. It's a much more of a preventative early intervention service, which we previously hadn't had.
Yeah. How many schools have this provision of the family focus service, and has similar success been experienced in other schools? And if they don't have it, are we planning to roll it out?
Family focus runs across the borough, so they would go into any school could refer in, and we'd work with any children that it doesn't matter where they live. It's not school specific, so it's very much a social services initiative, but working with colleagues across education and health to work with individual children and families.
Mr. Chair, when we were talking about, the thing is that when I was with the chair when we visited Pennegarn School, and we saw the specific thing there, and as it seems that this is now beginning to be rolled out to other schools. So, could you give examples of other schools where this is being rolled out to?
Yeah, we have an early there's an early support worker employed in Pennegarn, and we've seen that as a successful piece of work, and we've been working closely with one of Darren's colleagues, Tracy Peed, Tracy Peed, and what she's reported to us is that similar posts are or will be created in the other schools and clusters, but again that's at another level. They would feed in, if you like, into that early intervention strategy. So they could be doing bespoke pieces of work with children and their families, but also referring them in. So, if you like, it's seeing it as a sort of nesting arrangement, isn't it? How it would feed in. But I haven't got a detailed list of the number, but I know that the intention was to roll it out across other schools. But subject to the finance being available. It's page 31, Darren.
I do know as a school governor, the school I'm governor of, they've had this service and it has helped. The attendance, it has improved. Can I take you on now to page 34? Recommendation 1. Can you tell me if there's been any progress as this recommendation was made over a year ago? About child sexual exploitation.
Yeah. I mean, there's been quite a bit of progress in this. I've just got a couple of things to say on that. I mean, sexual exploitation is one of the key priorities of the local safeguarding board. We've now got 32 safeguarding leads across Gwent working in this area, and there's a number of issues, initiatives taking place. I think there's some planned theatre productions in schools. There's also been the DVD operation that was produced by Operation Thistle that's been rolled out. But also I think the other initiatives have been around things like getting taxi drivers trained, and that, and police officers at the front line. We've had a problem getting the figures of the numbers of police officers that are actually being trained because of the change in personnel. I did speak to the superintendent the other day, and she couldn't give me an absolute figure, but she was talking in numbers across Gwent of over 500 that have been trained, and that I know that the police and the missing children's team are working with licensing in Torvine to get taxi drivers and train them. And anecdotally, we're hearing some quite interesting feedback. Taxi drivers being surprised that they could be prosecuted for taking children to hotels or dropping them off. So it's clearly an issue that is happening, but actually they're not realising that they would be held personally responsible. So I think the training is beginning to have some impact, but obviously it'll take some time to roll it out, and it'll probably need to happen more than once to really get it into people's mind. But it is a key and very important issue, and I think that we've made quite good progress. Sometimes it's very difficult to actually define exactly how much, Because some of it, we'll only know when we start seeing the number of prosecutions going up or the number of young people reporting incidents going down. It's a sort of soft information, but I think it's making some good progress.
The other side of the coin, obviously, is the hotels themselves and what's happening there.
Well, I do sit on the board of the Breaking the Cycle with the police, which is chaired by the Chief Constable, and all I can say is, without giving any confidential information that might impact on investigations, that they are onto it. They know the hotels, and they are putting some of those under covert surveillance. I think that's the right word, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. I carry the same theme on. Have you got anything planned specifically for primary schools?
I think the focus this year has been, or over the last year or so, has been on bringing everybody up to speed in the secondary schools with issues. So all of the secondary schools leads have been trained, so they've all accessed Bernardo training through the Safeguarding Board. We've got all schools now have got a nominated CSE lead, who in most cases is the DSP, so the Safeguarding Lead Officer for the school anyway. And we focused on making sure that all of the schools have got training in place for all of those staff, the DSP, the Deputy DSP, and governors, so the Chair of Governor and the Safeguarding Lead Officer, Safeguarding Lead Governor has had trainings on the wider safeguarding issues. But all DSPs in secondary schools have accessed that CSE training. We've got a CSE lead now in the Education Service. It was offered to primary schools as well, and as I say, all schools have got a CSE lead, but the focus of the training was really around older children, so it was specific really to secondary, so I don't think primary schools have taken that up to date. Although the Safeguarding Board has also got level 1 basic awareness sort of training, CSE, and a higher level course that all schools can access. So I know there's a CSE Leads group as well now, and we've got an education representative for the region sitting on that, and they are looking at further materials that they're developing, on top of the Thistle and the other information that's gone out to schools already, and some of that is going to be primary focused. So I think it's a staged approach. It's focused in on year 7, 8, 9, and the older children secondary so far, and it'll be something that will roll out more in terms of primary over the coming year.
Thank you. I don't want to labour this point too much, but we recently, as you know, scrutinised this, and we made a number of recommendations. But can you tell me, is there any plans to involve children to get the message across? And are you happy that children, if they become suspicious, they know where to go and where to seek help?
Yeah, all of the, as I say, all of the schools have got safeguarding leads, yeah, and there's systems and processes set up in individual schools so that children can go to their teachers or a member of staff that they feel comfortable with. So in terms of making sure in schools where the children know, I think that is fairly well embedded and has been over time. I think in terms of primary specific, there's more work to be done. But I think that's an issue for the board. I think that is an issue for the whole of the region. It's not something that we're out to Kilda with in any way in Torvine. The focus has been, as I say, on secondary schools for the last year. There has been a session with secondary school children. We brought in Arid Goch, actually, a theatre that's done a presentation around Sexton for year 8 and 9 children across all of the secondary schools over the last year, and the Safeguarding Board are looking at purchasing a similar thing from another theatre that will be rolled out as well. And all of the children, there were groups of children that came in from our secondary schools to an event around safeguarding that covered CSE only a couple of months ago. And again, that's been something that's happened across the region, so there's been one of those in each of the authorities. And I believe the intention of the board is to sort of keep that going and have more of those events over time. It was well attended by our schools. All of our schools sent groups of children to that event.
Thank you. If you go on to page 43, the CSS IW review of safeguarding children and young people post-inspection action plan. Is the action plan clearer, and do you think progress has been made? It's recommendation 2, it is on page 43, sorry.
I think the intention is to take the action plan to a senior management team meeting in the very near future. I think the date is even in the diary, Councillor, but I think it's towards either the end of this month or in April with an updated action plan. I think it was accepted that it did need updating and clarifying in some parts. So it's a piece of work that's ongoing, and it is going to the senior management team within social care.
Yeah, going on from that theme then, children and young people mental health is obviously a big area of concern. What positive progress has been made on that?
I think members will be aware that progress in this area is slow, not just at a local level but at a national level, and Sue Evans is chairing a group across the former Gwent authorities which is attended by colleagues from education and health. It's a multi-agency group with the idea of it being a priority, or trying to make it a priority area. Other work has also been done with ABUHB to identify a couple of pilot areas across where different ways of dealing with mental health with young people can be addressed. So if you like, not necessarily seeing it at one of the high tiers, but looking at trying to do it in other ways at a lower tier, say a tier 2 or 3. Sarah's much more of an expert on mental health than I am. But engaging people, you know, who are working directly with young people, such as the youth service, because sometimes some of that work can be done through pastoral work rather than direct medical intervention. We are acutely aware, no pun intended, that the waiting lists for CAMS is still significant. There is more money being invested in it, but it is only going to just touch the surface. So we keep plugging away. It is an area, but I think it's an area that we've got to recognise. On an interagency basis, we can't keep pushing it to the health. We're having to say, in many ways, who else can deal with the low-level stuff? You know, and the things that contribute to it, such as bullying, you know, and all those sort of things. So those conversations that are now happening with, I can't remember his name, so you might, Luke? No, but he's a psychologist in primary, and he's leading that group. And I think they are going to pilot 2 areas. Torvine isn't one of them. It's going to be Monmouth and Newport. And one of that is because of the rurality, and the other is because of the numbers within the Newport area. But it will be, if successful, it will be rolled out across the board. And we learn from what they do anyway. But you know, but it's I think it's moving on. But it's an area, you know, it's an area I think we're going to be sitting talking about for a number of years. It is a significant gap. Children's mental health is. You know.
Just going back to what you were saying about the medical interventions, when it comes to hospitalisation, is it true that it's still only the Bridgend area that the hospital beds are available in? There were 5 beds, I think, for youngsters a few years ago. Is that still the same, or has that improved?
That's still the case. The beds are commissioned in Bridgend, but again, they're always full. And anecdotally, not so much for us, because thankfully we haven't had the issue, but children being taken to hospitals or other care provisions miles away in England, you know, which is, you know, is completely inadequate. And those representations are made. And I've got to say, one of the key people who makes a lot of representations about that is one of our local AMs, who's really quite hot on this. Lynn Eagle is really, you know, and I have many conversations with her about it, but I don't manage the health service, and you know, so we could only try and influence it, you know. But yeah, Sarah. Yeah.
Members may be interested to know that Welsh Government launched the Mental Health Crisis Care Concordat back in December. Regionally, we're working on our Concordat delivery plan. That includes children. And so certainly for those young people that are in crisis, there is work ongoing. I'm leading that piece of work for Gwent. And we're in the process of compiling that delivery plan, working with all partners to see how we can actually improve that situation. That delivery plan has to be with Welsh Government by the 16th of May.
I think it's just worth noting as well. I think there is an issue about psychiatrists and those working with young people not wanting to label them with mental health problems, and sometimes I would say that disadvantages those young people because they need to access the service, and if that is the only way you can access it, then yeah. And we've got young people, or have certainly had young people who've had to be placed out of area, and I'm not a psychiatrist, but if they haven't got mental health problems, you know, I'll eat my hat, because they are, you know, they are incredibly disturbed and damaged young people. Yeah.
There was a piece, I think it was on the news this morning, that there's a new psychiatric unit being open up in Cardiff, which looked, which actually looked as a superb new facility to replace the old one, which was one of the almost a throwback to the old days.
Yeah, I saw that. It's actually adults.
Yeah, but
not children.
I wondered if you had any comments or if you had any knowledge about it, but how it would tie up.
I mean, it's more or less the replacement for Whitchurch Hospital, which has been a long time coming. But yes, it won't directly have children there. Most of your adult psychiatric wards will have, not most, in the region there will be beds for 16 and 17-year-olds on adult wards in very specific circumstances. And if young people come onto an adult ward, there are particular things that have to happen in order to make sure they're safe and they get the care and support they need. But yes, the new hospital replacing Whitchurch is an adult facility.
I think, just to comment on that, I think we as a committee have still got concerns, but it's encouraging to know that it's moving up the list of priorities. I think that's it. That actually concludes the questions we've got on agenda item 5. I think if everybody's happy, rather than do the recommendations for that now, we'll do all the recommendations right at the end. It'll save you. So if we go on to agenda item 6 then, which is the progress against the adopted action plans. If I start off on the frailty, I ask you to go to page 47. Recommendation 1. Has the issue around performance information been resolved?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that, but I can get the answer to that question to you.
I think if you go on to recommendation number 3 then, in the same area, could you tell me, have the referrals from GPs increased?
Again, I do apologise.
Okay.
I don't have any of the frailty, not an area of my in my portfolio. I don't have any of the frailty information, but certainly we'll get that to you.
Okay. Go on, yeah, I appreciate that. Go on to page 48 then. The recommendation number 6. Can you tell me, have the findings identified by the Cordis Blight been fully addressed?
needed an update from Jill Pratlett on this, and I'm not, laying it to her door that we just haven't managed to touch base on it. And I grabbed Sarah this morning, in fairness, to come and assist this meeting. But we can answer those questions, and we will do.
Yes, if we go on to page 51, which is the National Inspection of Safeguarding and Care Planning, and the first recommendations, have the actions taken been effective? And how have they been effective?
Sorry, I struggle with this answer. Did the authority effectively discharge its call for parenting?
Yes,
the
update.
Children with complex needs have been undertaken by. Yeah, this is the piece of work I referred to that I said Sue Evans is chairing, that was being led across the Gwent authorities where children with complex needs. They're still mapping a lot of that work, so it's still in fairly early days. As you can imagine, when you bring 5 authorities together, we're all at different pages. We're all at different stages, so that work is going on. But the key one that's taken a huge amount of time has been around the CAMS issue, and that's where the focus has been. So,
and I'm sure all the children's views and opinions are being taken into consideration with that mapping plan.
It's a bit like adults. It's very difficult to obtain children's views. Obviously, where they're looked after, we try and ascertain those where we can within their looked after review. But I was looking at some comments last week or the week before from reviews where children were basically refusing to attend and saying, I don't want to come, I'm quite happy living with my foster carers. Why do these people come and talk about the things they do come and talk about? And in fairness, what some of the feedback one of the young people gave was quite disturbing about what had actually been raised in that meeting, which was confidential to them. So, it was totally inappropriate what was raised, and I've taken that up because it was a young woman and it was very personal in front of. I think, not with any intention, but not with the thought that would be given to any other child, is what I would say. You wouldn't do that to your children with a group of strangers in a room. So, we've taken that up. But gathering their views is difficult. But again, a bit like with adults, it will become a requirement under the new Act, and we're trying to think about the ways we're going to do that, because certainly where it's what we currently call children in need, we send out surveys, we get very little back. The only way we believe we can do it is face-to-face. Now, that's not too difficult on that basis with children in need, but when you get into child protection and the court arena, it's very difficult to get that sort of feedback from families, because, of course, you're in an environment where you're usually not wanted. So we think we know what the feedback is from them, but I think the key feedback is what's the progress for the child.
I think we as a committee, we are well aware of how difficult it is to get the information following on from our visits to the football factory, and we knew if you did it round a formal basis, you got nothing, but if you did it in an informal way, that was much easier. That's why we as a committee, we've actually changed how we do it. Last time we did it was with the adults, and we did it in the mayor's parlour, and that was much better than doing it in a formal basis, so we do understand the problems.
I was just going to say this is such a sensitive area and has to be handled so carefully. You can do more damage than good if you're not careful. And I think we need to just be aware of that in the background when we look at these figures and appreciate the problems that you have.
Now, did you want to carry on with that area number 21, 22?
On to number 21, which is recommendation 4 on page 52. And it's the Drag system. Why is it taking so long to find a solution to accessing Drag? And Do you have any information about what other authorities are doing on this with similar systems?
Well, I've got to admit, since we updated this, I went back and spoke to colleagues and was informed that the issue has been resolved and they do have access to DRIGE. So my previous update was it was a problem in terms of security, but actually they do now have access to it. So the independent reviewing officers, you know, I mean, they see everything else, so I couldn't see why they couldn't, but there was an issue around how we gave them access. But that's been resolved and they do now have it.
On recommendation 5, which is on page 53, would you say that the issues around move-on accommodation have been resolved?
I think this is an area we looked at in the previous committee, didn't we, with the issue around the young people preparing to leave care and so on. And I think that we can always do better, you know, and I think if we had a greater range and quality of accommodation, that could enhance the service. But within the, you know, the envelope that we've got, I think we do okay, and we do actually get reasonably good feedback from young people about that. And I think some of that feedback has what helped us inform the changes to policy. So I think, you know, the issue around can I stay in my foster home came out in a seminar years ago with one of our young people saying to one of your colleagues, you go and live in the Newport Hotel and see how you like it. And they didn't take the offer up, strangely, but actually realised that we did need to do something about it. So I think, you know, it has moved on.
That actually concludes that part of the agenda. And again, we'll do the recommendations right at the end. So if we go on to item agenda 7 now, this is the adoption service. Okay, yeah. Can I just say thanks ever so much for coming and the information you've actually given us. Thank you.
I do apologise about the other bit around some of this frailty stuff because Jill's on leave. Yeah. I didn't catch up with her. Sarah, you know, short notice, I said, can you come and help me with you? So, you know, Paxton.
Hi, welcome. Thanks ever so much for attending again. So, when this part of the programme is we're looking at the South East Wales Adoption Service development of performance measures and targets. Can I ask you, how can you judge the effectiveness of the service from the data supplied in the report?
Okay, is this on here? You'll be aware that the National Adoption Service has set the framework for all of the regional adoption services performance to be measured by. So all of the regional services are actually reporting on the same data. Within that fairly lengthy data set, there are a smaller number of published targets, and those are the targets which we've included in the report. So, for example, the target that requires children to be placed with a matched adopter within a 6-month period. We could see from that not all of the children that we placed for adoption were matched within that period. However, all of the children that we placed were matched within the 12-month period. The other area where we have a published target is the number of adopters who are assessed as being a suitable adopter and agreed by panel within the 8-month period, and we can see that the service is actually performing better than the national average. The dilemma we have, I think, with the National Adoption Service framework is what they are attempting to do is to measure regional service against regional service. Locally, I think we're still at the stage of actually trying to decide those areas which probably need more attention for local targets.
Right, I'll go on then to the second question we're going after. If you look at page 59, para 6.5, para 6.8, 6.12, why are targets not included in the graphs presented in the report on page 60?
Why are the targets not? Look and see. I think we described the target. Evidence would suggest that 8 of the 15 children were matched under 6 months. In the line below, 6.9, and then we went on to say at 6.10 that some of the children who hadn't been placed within that 6-month period were the large sibling groups and children with disabilities. Now, those are children which are very often hard to place and sometimes require an advertisement to find the suitable family. And so for those children, it can often take longer than 6 months, but all 15 of the children were matched within that period of 15-16.
I think the thing I'm trying to get is how many we've got that need to be placed and how many have been, so therefore we can sort of gauge one against the other. Do you see what I'm pointing?
Yeah, within the last year, all of the children that required an adoptive placement have been matched with an adoptive placement. Within the last 12 months, all of the children that required an adoptive placement have been matched with an adopter.
We go on to page 61, paragraph 617. There are 3 priorities laid out: recruit more adopters, recruit children, etc. How are we going to measure the success of these priorities?
Interestingly, we have a board meeting of the regional board on the 11th of April. And in addition, the regional service has actually just done a self-evaluation which has been provided to CSSIW. And what we have agreed is that at that meeting we will be setting targets for the number of additional adopters that need to be recruited, specifically for the hard-to-place children, because that is proving a challenge. And there will be some discussion about how we can measure the way that children and families are matched in a better way.
Thanks. On page 61 again, paragraph 6.17, how will you implement and measure success against the lessons learned?
What lessons from research? In a sense, that's where the links with the National Adoption Service come into play. The chair of this particular regional board also sits on the National Adoption Service. And the National Adoption Service is where the dissemination of research takes place, so that will be brought back to a local level. And there are specific areas which are being researched in terms of, for example, adoption support plans and how those are put into place. So that's where the benefit of having a National Adoption Service is made available. And then the lessons can be disseminated locally, and any particular areas that we can learn from can be put into practice. Hi.
BAEF charity has closed.
Sorry?
What, BAEF charity has closed.
Okay.
Yeah. What impact will this have on adoption service?
BAF charity closed briefly and has now reopened as BAF Cymru. And is continuing the work that the previous BAF, which was the national one that covered over England and Scotland and Wales, that one has gone. We now have BAF Cymru, which is operating in Wales.
So is what they do, has that changed at all? Is exactly the same? It's just that
it's more focused on Wales, if anything.
Fine.
Sorry. Looking at page 62, paragraph 8.1, can you explain, please, how you are measuring the benefits of the collaboration for service users?
The National Adoption Service, start from the beginning. Having a regional service is a statutory requirement. We have no choice, but we have to do it. Here in Torfaen, we already, prior to the decision that we had to go into a regional service across 5 authorities, we had already come together in a regional service for 3 authorities, with Blaenau Gwent, Monmouth and Torfaen. And that was based on the fact that coming together would potentially allow a more effective service to be provided for people who wanted to adopt and for children that required adoption. I think we're only really able to measure the benefits by looking at the targets that the National Adoption Service is providing for us, and potentially coming up with some more local targets as well. But we are part of a much bigger picture, and the National Adoption Service is providing a lead which really wasn't there before.
So are you finding that lead now quite effective from your point of view?
Yes, yes.
Can I go on then and say, what local targets has Torfaen set for the collaboration?
Torfaen hasn't set local targets in its own right. The board sets local. They're setting the local targets for Torfaen and all the other areas as well. The dilemma with setting targets just for the one local authority is that there is no right number of children that would be adopted, and no right number of inquiries that would be made of people potentially wanting to adopt. We can measure those things that children requiring permanency, people who apply to adopt, but setting targets in the way that each local authority might require is much trickier in this particular field. Would you say, Keith?
I'd agree. I think it makes it much more difficult on a regional basis because, A, who's going to collect the information, because you're using, different data sets. But I think we have put, I'm just looking at Helen, I think we've put one in for this year, which was around looking at the timeliness of adoptions once a placement order had been made, so that we were going to look at that at a local level. And I'm in my head, I'm sure we've put that in for this coming year.
I've certainly seen that actually in one of the action plans.
Because one of the things as the ADM, I sign them all off, the decision for children to go for adoption, which obviously is a recommendation to court, but I don't always see a sort of timetable for the matches. I see the matches as they come through, but I don't get any feel for how many. So for last year there were 31 children on placement order, a very high number. And what I was asking was, well, how many of them have actually been matched? And somewhere in the regional it'll be there, but I said I feel I want that locally. I want to be able to know that, because if they're not matched, as you know, within a certain time, you've got to go back to court because you lose that placement order. And for some children, it could be that we've been reluctant to spend the money to go on a national search. And I think, that those are very important issues. I'd have to introduce finance at some point in the meeting. But, in reality, though, isn't it? Rather than remain looked after for the rest of their lives, if we can spend some money and go, and they do recommend that. But I think for some children, it isn't appropriate for them to be placed even within Gwent because of the family identification and so on.
Do you look at it from an age profile point of view, Keith? Because obviously it does seem at the moment as if there's lots of little ones coming through, the under threes, and the matchings are very often for people who are looking for children between 0 and 3. We don't see the older age range coming through so much.
I think it's accepted that for older children it's much more difficult to have successful adoptive placements, and sometimes the very fact that they've been living with foster carers for so long, they've already formed strong attachments with those carers. It actually would be the second round of abuse to remove them. And so we sometimes, in a way, it's a pragmatic decision. And, you know, it'll be based on a view, can this child make another attachment? Should it have another disruption? And sometimes we've got situations where their long-term security is, well, it's in other ways through special guardianship orders, you know. And so I think we look at a whole raft of them. But obviously the younger children are, the more likely you are to have a successful adoption. The older they are, and they are the harder to place, generally the harder to place children, or children with significant disability. But, you know, once the children become above a certain age, people are reluctant to look at adopting them because they know that they come with a history and baggage. Yeah. So, well, Anna, you're an expert more on this than me.
No,
but that's...
I think the sibling groups where there is an older child and then with younger ones, if the decision has been taken that's in the interest of the children for them to remain together, then those are the situations where it's most likely to be successful, because the sibling group will then can move from the foster home into the adoptive placement. Those placements are harder to find. What the adoption service will always try to do is, as we said, to match within the 6-month period. Then the decision is taken, do we go for a national search? And that means going out to the National Adoption Register. And across the UK, that decision has to come back in many cases, to the local authority, because there is a cost to it. I don't know if you're aware, but for every child who's placed with another adoption service or with a private agency, it costs £27,000. And if it's a sibling group, then that's incrementally again added on to that. So we need to be absolutely sure we've exhausted our supply of local adopters before we actually go forward and identify an adopter from another agency. However, if permanency for the child is in their best interest, I think Torvine has taken a very reasoned view that it's better for the child to invest in that child's future than for that child to remain a looked-after child for the whole of their life.
If you think £27,000 over the lifetime of a child, that's not a huge amount of money. And I think what I would encourage colleagues to do is to think beyond just the implications for social care. There are implications for education, there are implications for health. We've got to think of the bigger picture. And if you have to spend £27,000 for a youngster and they go into a loving, caring, stable home for the rest of their childhood, I would say that's money well spent. And if you think of the boarding out allowance, if they remain looked after, over 18 years, it'll be a lot more than £27,000.
I think we more or less answered this, and I'll ask it anyway. It says, the National Adoption Service target states that they should be placed within 6 months, but the regional one says about ensuring appropriate matching of children. Which is the priority? So the 6 months is a target, but if you don't miss it, but if you don't hit it,
no,
fine.
But I mean, nevertheless, the urgency will be not to have a child waiting around for an adoptive placement. The active searching that goes on within the adoption service, they have a whole team dedicated to finding appropriate matches for the children, and that's reviewed regularly. I meet with the adoption service every month to look at our children who are on placement orders waiting for placements to see how we're, family finding, we call it. And we review that very carefully, very regularly.
I think one of the things that I see within the papers that come to me, where prospective adopters are often asked if another sibling is born, would you consider having them? And many will do that, and for whatever reason, another child or two are born, and often, the adopters will think about taking that child. And so not only do they get another child, but the siblings are kept together or reunited in a way, because, they haven't lived together. But it is an issue, because we have some families where there are multiple pregnancies and the children are all removed one after the other because they've affected no change in their lifestyle.
You'll be pleased to know the last question. Page 63, 14.1, paragraph 14.1. Can you tell me what progress have you made in developing local measures and targets since the meeting of all scrutiny committee, and how are you measuring that progress?
Oh, sorry. That original set of performance information that came to scrutiny, I think we were still trying to analyse what targets within that we would be able to potentially measure. And so collectively, across the region, the board had decided to focus on the placement of children, the timeliness of that placement, measuring the length of time it took for adopters to be approved, the length of time it took for inquiries to be responded to. Those are the targets from the national data set that regionally it was decided to focus on. I think now that this year is nearly over, when we meet again in April, I think that will be the opportunity to say, are there more regional targets that we can focus on from within the national data set, or even others that we would potentially choose locally that are not in the national data set. But I think the national data set was so huge when we looked at it, we thought we have to narrow down those things that we can potentially be measuring against, and those are the ones that across the region we're all reporting on to our scrutiny committees.
I think just to conclude, as you appreciate, we're all corporate parents, and therefore we just want assurances that the service is monitoring and measuring the success of the collaboration and the service delivery to parents and children.
Yes, absolutely.
Does anybody have anything else they wish to bring up? Do you have anything else that we've not covered that you'd like to
I don't think so.
inform us?
No. Apologise if the targets are not quite that which you would wish, but we hope to do better in the next year.
Can I just say thank you so much for coming and so much for the information you've given us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I think nothing that's come out of this, and it's my fault actually. I think in future when we do questions, when we have themes, I think individual members should carry that theme rather than me splitting it around. So I think that's something I've learned for future meetings. It's easier for. Yes, I know. Yeah. Yeah. Right, we now come on to recommendations. Helen, you've been busily scribbling, so do you want to come up with what you've come, and then we'll go into...
Okay, thank you, Chair. On the first item, which was the impact of recommendations, you seemed unhappy that there was no map available, even though the recommendation had been accepted. And Sarah also said that she thought that that would be helpful. So I think you ought to reiterate that recommendation.
We're disappointed that following our recommendation there is still not a map. Or very disappointed. Let's beef it up a bit.
Chair, can I just say, I'm conscious of some people I've been speaking to in recent days who would have found something like that extremely helpful, and I'm sure that could be replicated across the area. It is so important for people to have that sort of information they can pick up on and then take forward.
I know exactly what you mean, because I know a lot of the time it is not so much for the person in care, it's the relatives that, say you got somebody who did live in Hentless and the only bed is available in Glenavon, great, but how does the elderly resident who wants to visit get from Hentless to Glenavon? So that is the issue in a lot of cases. It's the ability to visit and keep in contact with them. So yeah, a map would be hugely useful.
Second thing I've picked up is on child sexual exploitation. I think you'd like to see either the pace or a continuation of the work to look at the primary schools and how awareness training is delivered to those children, but maybe look at this as a regional thing and come to a regional response to that.
I think, those of us that are on licensing, we know that there's been a big push, and that's actually been in a relatively short period of time. That training for taxi drivers has come in and it's happening and it's mandatory. So with that, and it's nice to hear that hotels and so forth are being targeted as well. But yeah, I think personally I'd like more involvement with the children themselves. If you remember that video we saw about 2-3 years ago, that was really useful because it was children telling other children what could happen. So I think we should, personally, I'd like to have more involvement with the children.
Noted, Chair. I'll just make a note of that now.
Because they said about having the theatres going out to all schools, and we used to do, well, they still do the Wings to Fly. I think a programme which could be variable to secondary and then a different type of play then for focused on primary school children.
I was just going to say the primary school element is so difficult and so sensitive because parents can be very protective without always appreciating what dangers there can be. But it can be turned almost on its head if one's not careful. So it does need to be looked at with great sensitivity.
And I know what you mean. You want to get the message across without frightening them to think that every male walking down the road is a potential perpetrator, and so it's getting it right is more important. Yeah.
Okay, more of a comment. You still have concerns around the availability of the CAM service or capacity within the CAM service, but you are encouraged by the progress and activity that is taking place. So I think it's fair to make a comment. And I think a general item on the impact of recommendations would be to ensure that the update is actually relevant to the recommendation that's made, because I think you struggled with that today. Moving on to item 6. Difficult on frailty because obviously the answers weren't available, so we'll make sure that that's added to the action sheet. And recommendation I've got there is recommend more attention is paid to what the recommendations are asking, and ensuring the updates are relevant and comprehensive. So again, similar.
Do you want to go on to the... Do you have anything extra that... On those two, yeah, I think we're happy. I think we have every confidence in you, Helen.
Okay, so the first one, listening to your debate, what I've got here is work to establish local targets to monitor whether the service is delivering for Torfaen citizens should be at an increased pace, so to increase the pace of that work. Measures of success should be developed when priorities are established. They must know there's a need to recruit adopters, so there must be work going on around that to see how many and which sort of adopters. So those measures of success should be taken into account whilst those priorities are being determined. And thirdly, look at setting operational targets for Torfaen relating to the quality rather than the quantity of service, because we were talking about how many children need to be adopted, but actually it's the quality that's important. The numbers are almost the demand on the service, so it's the quality of the service that we should be looking to set local targets.
Can I add a point there? That I think we're all pleased to hear that the priority is getting the right match as opposed to hitting the 6 months target. I think that we've got to say, I think we should say something like that. We were pleased to be informed that that was the priority and not hitting the sort of target. Yeah.
Yes, sure. I had that down as my next comment was
right.
to make a comment that you're pleased that it's the quality of matching that's important rather than a rigid target.
Yeah. Anybody got anything else they wish to bring up? Okay, then just to reaffirm what we've said previously, Helen and I will work together to word this. I'll email them out to you by sort of Monday, Tuesday next week, and then I'll give you a couple of days to read it, and if you wish to make any comment, get back to me, and then we'll look to forward the recommendations on. Anybody got anything else they wish to bring up? Sorry? Oh, yeah. Yeah, next item to be taken on the next meeting?
Next item, we will be looking at the deprivation of liberty orders, and we'll be working with, I think, Jill Prattler to put the report together.
Do we have the date for the next meeting?
I was just looking for
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
May the 12th.
May the 12th. Date May the,
Yes, it is, yeah.
May the 12th at 10 o'clock. Everybody happy for it to be in the morning again?
Yes.
And just to let you know, at the next full council meeting, I will be giving back a report to full council on the scrutiny activity we've been doing during the past 12 months. And I'll be making a comment on how good we've been. Okay, thank you. I think, unless anybody's got anything else, I'll just say thanks ever so much for attending and goodbye.